Welcome to the Thriving Artist Podcast, where we share strategies and support for artists to thrive.
We know that the art world can feel like a lonely place, and we want to provide a network of support, impactful strategies, and an abundance of encouragement to help you grow your authentic art career.
We're your hosts. I'm Jamie Smith.
And I'm Kaylan Butine, and we are also the co-founders of the Thrive Together Network, a community of female and non-binary identifying artists and artists who are caregivers.
We truly believe in community over competition, and we're so glad you're here. Enjoy this episode. Welcome back, podcast listeners. I'm Jamie Smith. I'm one of your hosts. And right now, the thing I am finding hard, I am struggling to find time for, is meal planning and food prep. It is a lifelong struggle for me.
And I'm Kaylan Butine, your other host. And I think the thing that always feels like a battle for my time is exercise. So you may have guessed it, but today we're talking about time, specifically sharing with you 5 tips or 5 ideas for getting more time for your art career. Who doesn't want that?
It's hard.
Yes, it's hard. Some of these tips might sound a little simple, but I actually think the simplest changes can often have the biggest results in our lives. Jamie, I'm wondering if you've ever heard of the Pareto principle. Does that ring a bell?
Educate me, Kaylan.
So this is also sometimes called the 80-20 rule. The Pareto principle states that for many outcomes, roughly 80% of consequences come from 20% of causes. And I like to think of our podcast as kind of offering our listeners that 20%, these small tips, small tweaks that you can do to, hopefully yield this large abundance of results for your art career and your life as an artist.
I love that because it's really hard. Well, it's exciting at the beginning to think you're going to make all these huge changes. I've done that before. And then you really just need to make small tweaks that are going to have this huge impact. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, so time is a big talking point for artists, especially for artists in our community. Lots of us, not all of us, artists on the Thrive Together Network are caregivers. Some of us are parents. Some of us have full-time jobs. It can be challenging to find time for anything that we want to do with all on our plates, let alone for our art making. And we really hope that the strategies we share in this episode inspire some small changes you can make to get more time for your precious art making practice. So, Jamie, I'm wondering if you'll kick us off and lead us into tip number 1.
I love tip number 1. Kaylan put together this episode, and when I first read it, I thought, oh no, because their tip number 1 is to sneak in an extra hour or 2 early or late in your day. And I read that and I thought, I've tried that before. I've said every day this week I'm waking up early and it's really hard. But what Kaylan has included in here is just doing that once per week. Mm-hmm. And that being the goal. And I love that. That's not overwhelming. I feel like it can be this special day that I make this effort either in the morning or in the night. I can also tell my family that this is happening. And so it's really, that really starts to add up. When you think about it, it's 2 or 3 extra hours a week, which is 8 to 15 extra hours a month. That makes a big difference in art making. So I just love that. So you pick one day a week and you decide whether you're going to get up 2 or 3 hours earlier or you're going to stay up 2 or 3 hours or later in your precious studio time. So I just think that makes so much sense. And that feels something like, again, that 20% tweak that could make a huge difference.
Yeah, I actually got the idea for that one because there's this class that I love at a local gym called Sculpt 45. And I can only get myself to get up and go to this class. It's a 6 a.m. class once a week. But when I get up and go, it's on Tuesdays. So it's like a big work day for me. And I get up at 5:30. I get my butt to the gym. I start, my day with this like really intense, good, empowering workout. And I think like the key for me is like, I'm not trying to go 3, 4, 5, 7 days a week. It's just like that one that feels so good. And then I do other supplemental exercise here and there. I think too, like a little tip for this, a tip for this tip number one is to incorporate a little reward for yourself when you get up. Maybe picking up, a special coffee as you head to the studio early, or making sure you have a little fun dessert if you're staying up late in the studio. I think, Jamie and I are always kind of encouraging our community to reward yourselves. And we often do that with food or drink. So that could be a good little incentive for either getting up early or staying up late. Okay, so tip number 2 for giving your art more time is to do a mini DIY residency. I love this one, of course, because on TTN, we are big supporters of art residencies. We actually host 2 a year for all of the artists in our community. But I think carving out time for a mini residency is such a powerful way to get your work time in. Basically, you're using the power of time blocking to get your art hours in. And we actually talked all about time blocking and ways that you can time block effectively on episode 4 of the podcast. So if you haven't tuned into that episode of the Thriving Artist podcast, you can check out episode 4 on time blocking. My recommendation for doing a mini residency is to book 2 days for yourself. Maybe you do this once a month. Maybe you do it once a quarter or a couple times a year. Block off those 2 days and plan to do nothing but make art. If you have a day job, this may have to be on the weekend. Maybe you use some sick or vacation time. Make sure you get childcare covered, you meal prep, kind of get all of your ducks in a row so that for those 2 days, you can just focus on making art and getting that art done that you want to get done, finishing that project or whatever it is. But studio time for 2 solid days sounds pretty dreamy.
I love that. I do that a lot, actually. For me, I tend to prep and do things at home or just mentally be prepping, but then I go in for that 2 days in a row. And I really like that because I feel like, especially, I can leave a project midway through and then keep that flow going. I have a harder time doing a little bit each day for me. Many things in my life are full on or not at all.
Right.
So I've had to kind of like trick myself. So, I think it's just so great if you can. There's like prep that goes into this, as you've spoken about, whether that's like literal meal prep or putting on that autoresponder on your email, however you're making your life work so that those 2 days can happen. But that's really the focus, I think, is key, and the intention behind it. And it's just a really smart way to make, that time for your practice happen. Kaylan, what's our 3rd tip?
Yes. So let's move on to tip number 3. Our 3rd tip for giving your art more time is to limit distractions in your studio.
Ooh, that's hard.
Yes. We live in an age where it is just so easy to have our focus and energy divided many different ways at all times. We're constantly being alerted to things, getting notifications. We're always picking up our phones. We're being interrupted. We're interrupting ourselves by switching tasks and trying to do many things at once. I know when I'm, working at home, I often am literally juggling 5 things. I might have a load of laundry and I'm like kind of mentally thinking, okay, when's the laundry going to be done? I got to go hang out the laundry in between this. And then, I might be listening to a podcast or playing a podcast and listening for edits and taking notes. But then I'm also, popping out to the studio for an hour or 2. There's just like so many things that we're kind of juggling. I think that divided brain, like when I'm in that mode of trying to do all of these things at once, really waters down my studio time. Like that's the only way I know how to say it, is that it just doesn't feel like good quality time. I feel like I'm much more effective when I am only doing my art, right? Where I'm staying focused on my work. And this allows me just to be more present, to more fully engage with my practice. So this tip isn't about getting more time necessarily, but it's getting better quality time. And that actually equals more time because you're, really focusing on doing that deep work in the studio.
I would take 2 hours of focused art making versus 6 of that distracted, unsure. And I think that this leads so well into tip number 4 of how to make more time in your art practice is actually, again, focusing on this quality time. And that is to make a plan for your studio. And I really do think that the only way that you can kind of fight through distraction, fight through our own inner critics and all these things that come up in the studio is by making yourself a plan.
Yeah.
And we totally admit that, as artists, we need experimentation, we need discovery, we need play. And so that is all very important and to be in the flow, but there's no reason that can't also
Be part of the plan.
be part of the plan.
Yes.
We are big planners. And so if that, feels like, oh my gosh, now they want me to make a studio plan. But the thing is that what that can really create for you is that focus and that, especially if time is short. I do this a lot, almost more like mentally throughout the week before I get to those 2 days of studio time. I'm really thinking about what I want to accomplish, what would feel really good. Because when I get to the studio, I want to be head down and doing that. And especially like these heavy lifting decisions, like size of the work you want to work on, colors, do you need to go and like get supplies, those types of things, and actually be done so much in advance.
Yes.
So that by the time you get there, there's focus and quality, and you're going to feel like you have more time, even though we're not asking you to fit in any more time. We're just thinking, how can we make this more efficient time, which I love.
Absolutely. And, Jamie and I believe in this so much that we actually implemented 2 weeks of planning and prep and getting your ducks in a row, getting yourself organized into our artist residency program that we host twice a year on the network. Those 2 weeks of thinking through, doing those heavy lifting of the decisions, as you said, Jamie, really help create a smooth residency experience because, like you said, you get to then put your head down and just do the work. And like, that's what we want as artists, but it takes so much to get to that place. That's kind of what we think we're doing 90% of the time. And it's probably what we're only doing like 10 or 20% of the time. Right.
Well, and those prep weeks, because that was really your suggestion, Kaylan. And I was like, oh, wow, 2 weeks of that. But wow, it makes such a difference. And you realize all the steps that go together to make a really focused art time happen. And a question that you often ask during that time is, if you're starting to add in art making into your life, what do you need to let go of?
Yeah.
And I think it's so important to think about because there is so many, we can give you tips on fitting in more and squeezing in more, but probably life is pretty packed.
Right.
Because for us it is. And so I just love this idea too of what are we like letting go? What are we making room for this other thing that we want in our lives? Instead of, we're in a culture right now where it's like, do it all, be it all right now.
Right.
And that's not realistic. So how do we just like care for ourselves a bit more in this?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that's like the whole ethos of this episode. Like, Jamie and I are not telling you have to spend 8 hours a day in your studio. Like, it's just unrealistic. Like, we're trying to address this issue of, we want you to be a whole person and to live a whole, enriching, fulfilling life. And that doesn't mean that you spend 90% of your time making art. Like, it just doesn't. It means that you're like an active citizen, you're part of a family, you're part of a community, you're spending time with people, you're doing other things that you love. And amidst all of that, you're still finding time for your art practice. And so I definitely hope these tips are more in that vein than just do it all, like be a super productive artist. Like that's not what we want for you. Thanks, Jamie. So let's bring us back to our tips. I'm going to go through our last one. This one, I feel like is pretty near and dear to my heart as it was inspired by the Artist Mother community. The fifth way to give your art more time is to adapt your practice to the time that you actually have.
Mm-hmm.
And I can think of so many examples of this, not just from artist parents, of course, but artists who have jobs and commute, like who are making work on the subways. I think of this artist mother who she would take Altoid tins and make a little paint palette and take them with her in the car line when she was waiting to pick up her kids and make, these small oil paintings in the car line. I myself have been moved towards a more textile based practice for multiple reasons, but one of those reasons is because, traditional painting, it just doesn't flow as well in my life as a busy artist parent. So, bringing textiles with me different places when we're traveling, in front of the TV, even like I want to be able to relax and also make art at the same time. And so I've adapted my practice to help me get a little bit more time out of my art making.
Well, and part of this is the worst thing that can happen is to say, I only make art in my studio when I have a perfect amount of time and everything's set up and I'm ready to go, because for me, that would just not happen very often.
Yep.
And a big part for me was that I was drawing, but I had all these supplies with me. And then I was welcomed into the world of drawing on my iPad. And that really changed because I could be, watching a show and have my iPad out. I could be planning things outside of the studio and then going into the studio with it. So I really believe in this. Mm-hmm. And I really think it just creates better quality studio time, as well as I think it helps me with my mental health as an artist, because I feel like I'm still working towards my goals, even when life takes me on a completely different direction and my time is not my own, because
Absolutely.
Often it's not. In a perfect world, it would be.
And I actually think probably most artists have some sort of their practice that is broken down in this way. That might not be what they call it, but where they've naturally adapted like part of what they do as an artist to fit their life a little bit better. And Jamie and I would actually love to hear from you if there's something that you do that kind of is adapting your practice to the time that you have. You can share that with us on our Instagram feed, where we'll be posting about this episode the week that it's released. We would love to hear from you. And we just are always so glad when you listen and when you support the work that we're trying to do to support you. So thank you.
We really do appreciate you being here. And if you find this episode helpful, please share it with other artists. We really want to spread the ethos of, make art that works in your life. And we believe in the work that you're doing. You can also leave us a review. It really helps with us putting in our effort and our time.
Yes.
We're time blocking all the time to get this done.
Yes, we are.
And as always, we are here for you. We are cheering you on, and we do believe in the work that you're doing as thriving artists. Thank you so much.